Right. So you know how much I love deep dives into stuff that can like actually help us, live better lives.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So today, let's dive into joy.
Oh, okay. I like it.
Specifically, how to cultivate more joy,
Mm-hmm.
in our
Yeah.
lives. And we're going to be looking at this article
Okay.
from Tickled Think.
Yeah.
It's called
Uh-oh.
6 Habits That'll Bring Joy into Your Life. It was published February 2nd, 2025.
Right.
And I don't know about you, but sometimes like chasing happiness just feels
Yeah.
like this huge undertaking.
Huge.
So I love how this article like breaks it down into these simple habits
Right.
anyone can incorporate.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really refreshing is that it's not about,
Yeah.
forcing like fake positivity or ignoring problems.
Right.
It's about like creating a mindset.
Yeah.
It's just like more open to experiencing joy.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the first habits that the article dives into is setting achievable goals. And it really emphasizes that, this isn't about like lowering your ambitions. It's about setting yourself up for success
Okay.
and avoiding that feeling of overwhelm we all know too well.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah. I'm like thinking back to that time when I tried to like
Uh-huh.
completely overhaul my life all at once,
Mhm. Yeah.
like new diet intense workout plan.
Yep. Been there.
The whole works. And I thought going big would be like
Right.
super motivating.
Yeah.
But it totally backfired. I crashed and burned within a week.
Yeah. That's so relatable. And it's actually really similar to what the author of this article
Oh, really?
describes. They were going through a really tough time,
Okay.
and they thought setting like huge goals would be the answer,
Yeah.
but it had the opposite effect.
Oh, wow.
They ended up feeling even more discouraged and stuck.
But like setting yourself up for disappointment almost, right?
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of people listening can relate to that feeling of just being like
Oh, for sure.
completely overwhelmed by goals that are either way too big or just like too vague to even know where to start.
Absolutely. So this habit is really about finding that sweet spot
Okay.
where a goal is, challenging enough to motivate you, but realistic enough that you can actually make progress.
Yeah.
And that feeling of accomplishment, even in those small steps,
Right.
is what really fuels that sense of joy and keeps you going.
I love that. So what are like some actionable tips from the article for setting these kinds of achievable goals?
Well, one of the biggest ones is to break down those like massive goals into smaller, more manageable tasks.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
I love that. So true.
Right.
So instead of saying I'm going to write a novel, you might start with, I'm going to write a page a day, or even just I'm going to brainstorm ideas for 30 minutes today.
Exactly. And another key point is setting realistic timelines, because it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking we can achieve things way faster than is actually feasible.
Right.
So the article suggests like really thinking through the steps involved and giving yourself adequate time.
And being flexible with it, right?
Yeah.
Like willing to adjust those goals
Absolutely.
as you go.
That's key.
Because life happens.
Life happens.
Things change.
It's all the time.
It's okay to adapt.
It's not about being rigid.
Right.
It's about setting yourself up for success.
Exactly.
In a way that works with your life, not against it.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so now on to a habit that I have to admit
Okay.
I struggle with.
Right.
Saying no.
Ooh.
Is it really possible to like set boundaries
Yeah.
without feeling like a total jerk?
That is such a common struggle.
Right.
And the article really dives into this, emphasizing that saying no is truly about protecting your well-being, not being selfish. It actually reframes it as boundary setting.
Oh, I like that.
Which I think is a much more
Boundary setting. Yeah.
empowering way to think about it.
Yeah, it sounds much more intentional
Yes.
and less like you're just being negative.
Exactly. Because, for many of us,
Right.
saying yes feels like the nice thing to do.
Right.
Or maybe even the way we prove our worth. But the author talks about
Right.
how constantly overcommitting actually led to burnout.
I've been there.
Yeah.
You just end up feeling resentful and drained,
Totally.
which is like the opposite of joyful.
The opposite of what we want.
Right, exactly.
So this habit is about recognizing that your time and energy are precious, and it's okay to protect them.
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices about how you spend your time so you can actually enjoy it.
So how do we get better at this whole like boundary setting thing?
Right.
The article mentions some practical tips, right?
It does, yeah. One of the first steps is Identifying your priorities. Like what truly matters to you? What brings you joy? Once you have a clear sense of that, it becomes so much easier to say no to things that don't align.
It's like you're not just randomly saying no. You're saying no for a reason.
Exactly.
You're saying yes to something else that is more important to you.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And another tip is to start with small no's.
Small no's, okay.
You know, you don't have to jump into turning down like huge requests right away.
Right.
Maybe it's declining an extra project at work or saying no to an invitation you're not really excited about, or just saying, let me think about it before committing to anything.
These are all things we can like start doing today.
Totally.
And they mentioned another strategy in the article that I absolutely love.
Oh, what's that?
Scheduling me time as if it were like an important appointment.
Yes.
Because it is important.
It's so important.
It's so easy to let our own needs just like fall by the wayside.
Fall to the bottom of the list.
But this is about making a conscious effort to prioritize your well-being.
Absolutely. It's recognizing that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's essential.
Love it.
And when you feel recharged and energized, you're so much more likely to experience joy.
Yes.
In all areas of your life.
100%. Okay, so on to habit number 3.
Okay.
Complaining less.
All right.
Now, I have to be clear. I don't think complaining is like inherently bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's necessary to process emotions and connect with others.
Absolutely.
But the article warns against it becoming our default mode.
Yes, and I think we've all been there, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Stuck in a negativity spiral where all we can see is what's wrong.
Ugh.
And the author actually shares a personal story about this.
Oh, really?
They were going through a really tough period, and their complaining went into overdrive.
Wow.
It wasn't a solution. It just kept them stuck in that negativity.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, misery loves company. But the company of negativity doesn't actually help anyone, does it?
No, not really. So this habit isn't about never complaining. It's about becoming aware of how often we do it.
Okay.
And how it's affecting us. Are we using it as a way to process and move forward? Or are we just getting stuck in a rut?
So it's about being mindful of our negativity.
Yes.
And choosing a more constructive approach.
Exactly. And the article offers some really interesting strategies for this.
Oh, cool.
One of them is setting a complaint-free time each day.
Okay.
It could be an hour. It could be just 15 minutes. The point is to intentionally create a space where you focus on something else besides what's bugging you.
I love that idea. It's like a mental detox.
Right.
Activity. And speaking of detox, the article also suggests consciously shifting your focus to the positive.
Instead of dwelling on what's wrong, try to find things to appreciate.
Right.
Even small ones.
I love that. And my favorite tip from the article is
tell me.
For every complaint you make, try to find 2 good things to appreciate.
I love that it's like a mental rebalancing act.
Yes.
And it's not about ignoring the negative.
Right.
It's about intentionally bringing more balance into your perspective.
This is so interesting. It's fascinating how these like seemingly simple habits can actually have such a profound impact on our overall well-being.
It really is. And you know what's even more interesting is how they all like connect and build on each other.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, like how setting those achievable goals we talked about can actually make it easier to say no to things that don't really align with what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. When you have that clear vision of what you're working towards, you know, what your priorities are, it gives you the confidence to set those boundaries and protect your time and energy.
It's like saying yes to yourself and your goals, which is ultimately a way of saying yes to more joy in your life.
And that ties into the idea of complaining less, too. You know, it's not about suppressing those difficult emotions, but about choosing a more constructive approach.
Yeah, the article makes a really good point about how sometimes complaining necessary, like it's how we process things, vent a little, and sometimes even connect with others over shared frustrations. But there's a fine line between healthy venting and getting stuck in a negativity spiral.
Right. It's about recognizing when that complaining becomes less about problem solving and more about just stewing in negativity. And that's where a habit like gratitude can be incredibly powerful.
Because it helps shift your focus from what's wrong to what's right, even when things are tough.
Precisely. It's like training a spotlight on the good things in your life instead of letting them get lost in the shadows of all the negativity. And the amazing thing is that research has actually shown that cultivating gratitude can have tangible benefits for our well-being.
Wait, really? So it's not just about feeling good. There's actual science behind it.
Absolutely. Studies have shown that practicing gratitude can reduce stress, improve sleep, boost our immune systems, and even increase feelings of happiness and overall life satisfaction.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like gratitude is more than just a feel-good practice. It's a key ingredient for a healthier and happier life.
I think so. And, the author of this article, who initially was a bit skeptical of the whole gratitude thing, talks about how they had this aha moment when they finally understood that it wasn't about ignoring problems or pretending everything was perfect.
So what was the big realization for them?
They realized that gratitude isn't about denying the negative, but about acknowledging the good alongside it. It's about finding those glimmers of light, those things to appreciate even in the midst of challenges. And that simple shift in perspective can make a world of difference.
It's like choosing to focus on the flowers instead of the weeds in the garden of your mind.
I love that analogy. And it doesn't have to be anything big or dramatic. It could be as simple as appreciating a warm cup of coffee in the morning or a beautiful sunset at the end of a long day. Those small moments of appreciation can really add up over time.
Speaking of adding up, let's talk about kindness for a moment. The article emphasizes that it's not just about grand gestures. It's about those small, everyday acts of care that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that research has shown that performing acts of kindness can actually boost our own happiness levels.
Wait, seriously?
Mm.
So being kind to others actually makes you as happier?
It's true. It releases endorphins in our brains, which have mood-boosting effects. So it's a win-win situation.
That's amazing. I always knew kindness was important, but I didn't realize it had such a powerful impact on our own well-being.
Yeah.
The article mentions a story about how the author, during a particularly difficult period, had this realization about the importance of offering kindness.
Right. They were feeling incredibly bitter and resentful, and it was affecting everything in their life. But then they had this epiphany that even though they were struggling, they could still choose to be kind.
So it was like a way of reclaiming their own sense of humanity.
Exactly. And it's not about being fake or putting on a happy face when you're not feeling it. It's about those genuine acts of care, big or small, that can brighten someone's day and maybe even inspire them to do the same for someone else.
It's like creating a ripple effect of positivity in the world.
And it can start with something as simple as holding a door open for someone offering a genuine compliment or just listening with your full attention when someone needs to talk. Those small acts can make a huge difference.
Okay, let's talk about one of the tougher habits to cultivate forgiveness.
Mm.
I think it's something a lot of us struggle with. The article frames forgiveness as a gift you give yourself. But honestly, it's not always easy to let go of hurt and resentment, is it?
It's definitely a process, and it can be a painful one. But what's fascinating here is that forgiveness isn't really about the other person. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying all that anger and bitterness.
Yeah, the author shares a story about holding on to resentment from their childhood, believing it somehow protected them. But it ended up just weighing them down and preventing them from fully experiencing joy.
It's like that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You're the one who ends up suffering.
That's a powerful image, and it makes you realize that forgiveness isn't about condoning the wrong that was done. It's about choosing to release yourself from the grip of that negativity.
It's about recognizing that we can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward. We can choose to hold on to that hurt, or we can choose to let it go and create space for healing.
That's such an empowering way to think about it. It puts the power back in our hands.
Exactly. And forgiveness doesn't have to happen overnight. It's often a journey, and it's okay to take your time, but the freedom that comes with letting go of that resentment is truly incredible.
It's like lifting a huge weight off your shoulders.
And it allows us to create space for more joy in the present moment because we're not constantly dragging the past along with us.
This all ties back to what we were talking about earlier with complaining less by letting go of those negative thoughts and emotions. We create more space for positive ones.
You're absolutely right. It's about consciously choosing what we want to focus on. Do we want to dwell on the past and let it continue to hurt us? Or do we want to move forward and create a more positive future? It's a choice we make every single day.
And speaking of choices, I think it's important to emphasize that these 6 habits we've been discussing are not about achieving some kind of perfect state of happiness.
Right. It's not about becoming some sort of blissful robot who never experiences negative emotions.
It's about recognizing that we have more control over our happiness
Hmm.
than we often realize. It's not about waiting for external circumstances to change. It's about making those internal shifts that allow us to experience more joy regardless of what's going on around us.
Exactly. And it's not about doing everything perfectly all at once. It's about taking small steps, experimenting with these habits and seeing what works for you.
Yeah, this episode is full of such great takeaways. We've covered setting achievable goals, saying no more, often complaining, us practicing gratitude, being kind to others and ourselves, and the powerful act of forgiveness.
It's a lot to take in, but even implementing one or two of these habits can make a real difference in your life.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs, but the key is to keep practicing and to keep choosing joy.
Okay, are you ready to wrap things up with our final thoughts?
Okay, so we've been exploring these 6 habits for cultivating more joy, and I'm curious, what's resonating most with you so far? Are there any that you're thinking, oh, I could definitely use more of that in my life?
You know what's really striking to me is how interconnected all these habits are. It's like they almost work as a support system for each other. Like, think about setting those achievable goals we talked about and how that can make saying no easier.
Right. It's like having a clear why behind your boundaries. Like if you know what you're working towards, it's easier to let go of the things that don't serve that bigger picture.
Exactly. It's not about deprivation. It's about
Yeah.
aligning your actions with your values. And, when we talk about complaining less, it's not about suppressing those difficult emotions. It's about choosing a more empowered approach.
Yeah, the article really emphasized that, right? Like sometimes a good vent session is necessary. It's about recognizing when it becomes a habit that's actually like blocking joy rather than helping us process.
It's about becoming aware of that tipping point, where venting turns into dwelling.
Mm.
And that's where a habit like gratitude can be so powerful.
Because it helps us shift the focus right from what's wrong to what's right, even in the midst of challenges.
It's like intentionally training your attention on those bright spots. It doesn't erase the difficulties, but it provides balance.
Okay, let's talk about kindness for a moment.
Yeah.
I love how the article emphasized that it's not about grand gestures. It's about those small, everyday acts of care.
And the impact of those small acts can be surprisingly profound, both for the giver and the receiver. The author shared that anecdote about how during a really tough time they felt so much bitterness, and then they realized that offering kindness to others was actually a way to reconnect with their own humanity.
Yeah, I think so many of us can relate to that when we're struggling. It's easy to turn inward to close off. But sometimes the most healing act is to extend a hand outward, to offer a bit of ourselves even when we feel depleted.
Because kindness isn't just about what we give, it's also about what we receive in return, that sense of connection, that reminder that we're not alone, that can be incredibly uplifting.
And speaking of listing burdens, let's circle back to forgiveness. I'm struck by how the article framed it as a gift we give ourselves. But I have to admit, letting go of anger and resentment can feel almost impossible sometimes.
It's true, forgiveness can be one of the most challenging habits to cultivate. But the author shared such a powerful story about clinging to resentment from childhood, believing it offered protection, but eventually they realized it was actually perpetuating the pain.
It's a powerful reminder that forgiveness isn't about condoning the wrong that was done. It's about choosing to release ourselves from the burden of that past hurt.
It's about recognizing that we can't change what happened, but we can choose how we relate to it. Now we can choose to hold on to that anger, or we can choose to let it go and create space for healing.
And I think sometimes the most important person we need to forgive is ourselves.
That's such an essential point. We can get so caught up in self-blame and regret, but cultivating self-forgiveness can be just as liberating as forgiving others.
So this deep dive has been all about finding those practical, actionable ways to cultivate more joy. And it's not about pretending life is perfect. It's about building resilience and choosing a more empowered perspective.
It's about recognizing that joy is not some passive state we just fall into. It's something we actively cultivate through our choices, our actions, and even our thoughts.
We've covered so much ground today, setting achievable goals, saying no with confidence, shifting from complaining to appreciating, practicing kindness, and embracing the power of forgiveness.
And remember, it's not about trying to do everything perfectly all at once. Start with one habit that resonates with you. Experiment with it and see what happens.
This has been such a rich and inspiring conversation. I hope our listeners are walking away feeling empowered to cultivate more joy in their own lives.
It's been a pleasure diving into this topic with you.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. Remember, joy is a practice, not a destination. So what small step will you take today to bring a little more joy into your life?